Ladies and gentlemen, we're actually stepping towards another little courtyard. I believe this little courtyard here used to be the imperial kitchen, and that's where they, after killing those animals and turned them into like sacrificial items, chefs or the imperial attendants, they will have to clean and wash and process and make all the dishes. So this is where all the work is done. As you can see that it's a very peaceful courtyard that has chambers on both sides, the annex chambers, and also a main hall in the middle. Quite a few buildings inside. And also on the wall, it says that this imperial or divine kitchen compound was also renovated by the World Monuments Watch. So thanks to their efforts, I think the both pavilions where our cameraman is filming, those are actually the renovation from the World Monuments Watch. So look at that. There are altogether like 2 pavilions by the opening of the courtyard. Now let's walk this way, like into one of the side chambers to see the exhibition. Here is the entire exhibition. The room is decorated with like documents and like material on the wall that like introduce the Central Axis. As you know that the Central Axis now, Beijing Central Axis is the 8th World Heritage of the Beijing city. This 7.8-kilometer long like urban planning line that strings the Forbidden City, part of the man-made canal, and also with like temples located on both sides of the Central Axis, and the ancient like city gates and the pavement for walking, and all of that. I think altogether 20 different sites of Beijing. They're all along this Beijing Central Axis. If you can maybe just take a look on this model on my left-hand side, and the shining golden part in the middle, that's the Forbidden City, or now known as the Palace Museum, with that little artificial hill right behind it. And it goes all the way down to the southern part of Beijing. Right, those are the city gates, which is now the southern edge or the southern end of the Tiananmen Square. And then it connects with this, like the walking path, which is nowadays, for those of you that been to the Qianmen pedestrian street, you know that those are hundreds of restaurants and shops, and it's quite like prosperous, like commercial, like shopping street. And now in the south part of Beijing and here, well, I think because the limitation of the showcase, because now they only show maybe 1/3 of the Temple of Heaven, and that's the temple compound on the eastern side of the Central Axis. Well, on the other side of the Central Line, and here locates the Temple of Agriculture. Okay, so this is where we are, and I believe that we're right here in this little courtyard, like in the western wing of the temple compound. Or to be more precise, we're actually in this the western chamber, the chamber that located on the west inside of this western courtyard. Hmm. So I think that the light might be a little too dark for us to see the whole thing. But just to give you an idea, this is what we call the animal killing pavilion. It sounds very brutal, but that's where the animal is processed. All right. Once we chose the perfect sacrificial items, then we need to basically we need to like end their life, and this is where it happens. All right. This is what you can see inside of the building. That there is a giant pit on the ground. I believe this is where we skull and fur and wash the animal. Okay. And some of the burners and the layout of this temple compound. I guess we don't have to go through like those document pictures one by one, just to give you an idea that for any people that would like to know more of this temple, if you can come to this divine kitchen courtyard, then you're more than welcome to learn from those like information and all the introduction. And by the way, a lot of those introduction, for example, it's bilingual, so there is both English and Chinese. That would make it a lot easier for international travelers. So though here we have more pictures. This is actually very interesting because here on this cross beam, and we see the traditional Chinese art is more of like painting on the cross beam. But what makes it different is the color is different because we managed to combine like the Chinese herbs into the painting powder, which makes it, I mean, the painting powder could be toxic and that will keep bugs or termites away from the wooden structure. It's a very traditional but effective way of protection to those wooden structure. And this is the whole layout of the temple compound. And once again, we're right here inside of the divine kitchen, little courtyard. And I think from the size of the temple that you can tell that this is the main like structure, which I'm going to take you there after this. And what about the buildings on the other side? Well, lately it's been open to the public. So if you can you find the imperial, like the farmland, the little field where the emperor used to work and farm? Okay, so this is the land, like the little earthy, I think the yellow part indicates the earth. So after the emperor's like demonstration of farming, and he would actually get out this little compound through that gate in the middle. And I think that little palace or the courtyard of like several layers, that's where the emperor rested after the farming activity. Okay, now walking out of this the courtyard of Divine Kitchen, we're heading to the Tai Sui Hall, the main compound inside of this temple. So what does this Tai Sui mean? I mean, what's the meaning of Tai Sui? It's related to the ancient Chinese celestial system. Because when the ancient Chinese, we observe all the stars in the universe, we think, I mean, every 60 years, it's a cycle that consists of 10 heavenly stems and 12 earthly branches. All right. And when the ancient Chinese observe the moving of Jupiter, the planet in solar system, we think that approximately it takes 12 years for Jupiter to orbit the sun. So that's why we name Jupiter the yearly star. So we divided like this circle, what is that word? Apholistic, into like 12 different like equal segments. And every year when Jupiter passes like one period of time, then that's how we define a year. Just when Jupiter passed, like one segment. And I think it's because of the Chinese tradition. And later we created another star that also orbits the sun, but in the opposite direction, or the opposite direction compared to Jupiter. And we named that like the other yearly star, Tai Sui. So I know it's a little complicated, but to all Chinese, Tai Sui, this god, is of key importance. We think that like every year, your fortune, like what's about to happen to you, whether good things or bad things, it's all because it's all in the hands of Tai Sui. Because Tai Sui keeps records of your good deeds, like versus the bad deeds, like misbehavior, your merits and achievements versus things that you're not supposed to do or crimes that you committed. So as the Chinese, like Ming Dynasty emperor, they would always, like every year, I think the second month in autumn, that's when they would come to the temple and worship the god of Tai Sui, the yearly god. All right. And this large temple compound behind me, this is where they perform the ritual ceremony. So if you can follow my lead, let's take a look of what's inside. So now this ancient temple compound has become the museum house for the ancient Chinese architecture. For example, the first thing that really caught my attention, which is hard to miss, is this like very overwhelming decoration in the ceiling. Does any of you know the name of it? I'm sure that for those of you that've been to China, you have seen that probably in the Forbidden City, or I cannot think of any like places that you might be this close to see the structure. I think this is caisson. That's the English name. Or if you ask me, I would like to like translate it, or just to describe the function of it. It looks like a water well, like upside down, um, installed on the very top of the building, from inside, like in the ceiling part. So I think the reason why there has to be a well is because we believe that all of the ancient Chinese architecture that is built mainly by using the wooden structure and fire would be the major threat. Uh, in order to prevent fire, there has to be water. And we think that very different from the evil dragon in Western culture, the Chinese dragon, it does not just spit fire, or actually it spits water out. When there's droughts, when all the peasants need water, and it's very auspicious, and it would just shoot water out of his own mouth, water the land. And the same case when fire happens, we believe that the great dragon from the middle would spot water out from its mouth and put out the fire. I think that's a very symbolic fire prevention. In all the Chinese like important imperial architecture, such as the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the office building for the Ming and Qing dynasty emperors, there is always like a structure like this in the very like the center of the building. All right. And just take a look at the structure and see how ornate and complex the carving the carving is. And see those, all the miniature like wooden structure, those are the mortars and tenons, all the little rafters. That's the copy of the real, like the wooden work that supports the building from the side. So we put it like on the side of that dragon. So just imagine, in order to realize all the little like wooden pieces, the wooden locks, and how much of work would that be for the craftsman? All right, and we're so lucky that we can today see it here in Zhejiang. So talking about maybe we should start from this side, if you can come with me. Being the museum for ancient Chinese architecture in here, it gives you a very informative introduction of the Chinese ancient architecture in different dynasties, like time era. For example, here, of course, the history of the ancient architecture can trace back way before the Tang Dynasty. But I think, as we have already come to the side of the building, and here it demonstrates, I think, the peak of the Chinese civilization, the Tang, which is from 618 AD to 907 AD. And does anybody recognize which city that one is? If you think that's Beijing, then unfortunately, this is not Beijing. For those of you that have been to the city named Xi'an to see the terracotta warriors, and congratulations, that's the city. So that's the city like 1,500 years ago, back in the Tang Dynasty, used to be the capital for the Tang Dynasty. As you can see, and this is the imperial city where the emperor used to live. And all that little oblongs and squares on the side, those are different community or the government institute that function with different functions located in different parts of the city, but all in a perfect square or oblong. So that's a very classic chessboard layout, which Beijing followed, back in we're talking about 1200, when the Mongolian designed the city with a similar layout, but not as like neat and regulated as the one in Xi'an. And here, this is, I think, the model of this temple from the Tang Dynasty, as you can see the wooden structure. And I think one characteristic of the architecture from the Tang is that usually has a massive like rooftop. That's just my understanding, because as you can see the scale of the roof compared to the Ming and Qing dynasty, for example, the Forbidden City. I think the edge of the roof for the ridge extends much longer, which makes it, I think, if you ask me, I think more artistic. It's very beautiful. I think which requires to have more structure, like to support the very long roof from underneath. Just taking a walk around, and here you can see the structure and the temple compound from the Song Dynasty. Of course, including this very traditional and famous academy in Hunan province. I've been there myself, very inspiring. And that's also built like back in the Song Dynasty, the North Song, so around 900 AD. So 900 AD, Beijing at that time was occupied by the Khitan people, known as the southern capital of the Liao dynasty, until 1153, one of the emperors from the Jin dynasty. That represents another ethnic group. So they defeated the Khitan people and chose Beijing as the central capital for the Liao Empire. So that was a very, very chaotic time because the southern Song was driven to the south of Yangtze River, while the northern plan of this Middle Kingdom was taken by the Khitan people and later by the Jin people. And there was a very powerful nomad that came from the north and wiped them all out. And those are the Mongols. The great Khan, or the great leader of the Mongolian Empire, Kublai Khan, who was the grandson of Genghis Khan, he set Beijing as the grand capital, the Kambale, for the Mongolian Empire. That was before the Ming and Qing. But because the Mongolian dynasty collapsed later, like after 98 years, so the Ming started. And speaking of the Ming, and this is the legacy from the Ming Empire, and also the best preserved large palace compound known as the Forbidden City. So, my dear friends, and now the structure that we're looking at, of course, this is only like a model, but of the most complicated, and I think the most beautiful structure of the Forbidden City. This is one of the watchtowers. There are like legends about how we created this watchtower, and because the emperor gave such a demanding and impossible to realize the plan, because the emperor required to have like a very complicated like supporting structure, the number of the pillars, the number of the beams, and those diagonal like structure, the number of that, those are all required by the Ming emperor. So the craftsman or the designer, he had no idea how to realize that until one night he fell asleep, and in his dream there was an old man selling grasshopper, and from the size or the the structure of those bamboo little cage, and he was inspired, and that's how he came up with this design map of this watchtower. Far as I know, the most talented or the most skilled carpenter in the that work in the Palace Museum, their ultimate mission is to restore the watchtower.